Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about the signs that occurred preceding the Exodus. Signs will have explanations. In the events at the beginning of the book of Exodus, Moses and Aaron are given the ability to perform certain signs. They perform some of these signs before the people and the elders of Israel, and they also perform some of these signs before Pharaoh and his council as well. At the beginning, of course, whenever they're first performing a sign before Pharaoh, the sign that Aaron performs is he casts down his rod and the rod turns into a snake. The thing is, though, that the gravers, or the magicians, who were with Pharaoh, did likewise. They performed a similar act and cast down rods that turned into snakes as well. Now, of course, Aaron's rod went and ate their snakes according to the account in Exodus, but regardless of that, an explanation had been provided. The gravers were able to mimic that sign, and therefore it was deemed not a sign because they had this explanation. Obviously, it was something that was insignificant. Obviously, it was not something that needed to be heeded because they were able to do it. So therefore, it was of no consequence. And so Pharaoh, of course, did not listen to the sign. Now, as the events continued to unfold, there, of course, was the plague of the water turning into blood. However, the gravers, once again, they were able to mimic this sign as well. They had an explanation for it. They were able to replicate what went on to some degree, at least, and then Pharaoh did not listen. An explanation had been provided. And, of course, continuing on to the plague of frogs, the frogs were caused to ascend from the water, and yet the gravers were able to do the same thing. They were able to cause frogs to ascend from the water as well. And so these explanations that were provided, these replications of the sign, and therefore the ability to say that, well, we have an explanation for it, they just did something like we did. It's not something that you need to pay any attention to. Obviously, these people are just crazy and they just have similar ways to us. It's not anything of significance. These explanations were provided, and even though these were legitimate signs, these signs were supposed to be legitimate according to the Exodus narrative. These signs were indeed signs. They were indeed supposed to be messages from God to Pharaoh and to his people, and also to the people of Israel as well. These indeed were to be signs. They indeed were legitimate. But regardless of that, there were explanations provided. There will be explanations provided probably with any sign, whether it was back in the time of the Exodus or whether it is modern day. If there were events to occur that were on the level of the Exodus and on that scale, there would probably be some expert that the media would have on TV, if the media even covered the issue, if they had any kind of truthfulness at all to it. They would probably bring on some expert, and the expert would say, oh, well, this goes on every so many years. We know exactly what goes on with this, and we have a scientific explanation. This is completely normal. Nothing to be concerned with. Don't listen to these crazy people. There are always crazy people out there saying something nutty. Don't listen to these. They just got lucky, and it was just a coincidence. And there will always be some kind of explanation like that. But that does not necessarily mean that the sign is insignificant. That doesn't mean that because there was an explanation that the sign was not a sign. As the events of the Exodus continued, however, the gravers were apparently very open-minded people, surprisingly. They apparently were very open to changing their mind as new information came to light. And so when the sign of the plague of fleas came upon them, they were able to admit, this is the finger of God, this is the finger of Elohim, they said. They were able to reverse their previous course of positions, and having said that, oh, don't listen to Moses and Aaron, these are insignificant, they are not signs, they were able to overcome that tendency to be consistent, and they were able to admit there is no explanation that we have for this. This is indeed a sign. They were able to admit it. And so I would consider them to be very open-minded, very significant to point that out. But I'm pretty sure that if things went on today, or even back then when things were going on, there will always be someone that has some explanation, even if it just amounts to being cognitive dissonance, even if it's just an explanation because they just refuse to believe it. Even when the tabernacle is restored and there's the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, I'm pretty sure there will be someone out there saying, oh, this is not significant, there's an explanation for it. Why are you all doing this other thing? I'm going to go do my own thing. There will always probably be someone out there that doesn't believe it, that has some explanation. And indeed, there may be explanations. There is not this rule that a sign has to violate the laws of physics, or it has to be totally, completely impossible, or some event that has never, ever occurred before. There is no rule that says a sign must conform to that type of criteria. So there may be explanations. There very well could be explanations, but that does not necessarily mean it's not a sign. And that's something to be aware of, something for us to be mindful of. Now, just because there are signs, even if they are truly signs, that doesn't mean that we should not test the prophets. False prophets can still perform signs according to Deuteronomy 12:32 through 13:5. We must still test them to make sure that they are teaching according to the Torah. They must still be teaching us to walk according to the way we were commanded to walk. And that also includes that they are not supposed to be adding to the law or taking away from the law, as detailed in that passage. And so even if there are signs, we still need to be mindful of the prophet's test. However, we should be mindful that there will always be some explanation. People will always come up with an explanation, whether it's legitimate or not. And so, of course, there is the issue of a pattern of events. One event in isolation can be easily explained away as coincidence. But if we're talking about a whole pattern of events, as with the events of the Exodus, obviously the evidence begins to build over time. And that's certainly not to say that they shouldn't have listened to the first sign. But after many, many signs have built up repeated predictions of the same things going on over and over, that is just more reason to listen. But even so, many people will probably kind of buckle down and just insist that we cannot listen to this, whether it is a legitimate course or not. So it's something to be mindful of, not only in the events of the Exodus, but there will be explanations probably if things were to occur now. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos where we talk about specific Torah commands. And be sure that you stay in touch so we can continue this conversation. Thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Peace.